Son, I'm taking a chance on you, brother Roaring Sun or sister Roaring Sun. You could unmute your mic.
It's brother. Thank you for having me on the panel tonight.
Yes,
I
sir.
didn't come here to give you any war or anything. I
Okay.
will say, for the sake of full disclosure, I do consume some Manosphere content, but I've also done quite a bit of reading. Some of the books you have, I've also read. And I didn't quite figure out how the two, as the last caller said, chaos reign,
Hmm.
how the conscious community is split from the Manosphere. I mean, to some extent, the two a lot of people in the manosphere use a lot of that content. I mean, you talk about racial battle fatigue. I know Tia Son Johnson has talked about. He's interviewed the author of the racial battle fatigue. We listen to his content.
Hmm.
But black men have certain specific needs also, and I have specific concerns with the community that many people feel neglects them. Now, this is not a large question we have to answer tonight. I understand you're going to do a series on this, of course, but how exactly is the manosphere separate from the conscious community if they use some of the same, I don't even want to say talking points, but some of the same source material? They acknowledge the concerns of black people and black men. They just, like you just said, you got to work with the willing. If the
Yeah.
other side won't work, how much can you do? And as I guess as it was said to Malcolm in the movie, how long must you bang your head against that wall?
Yeah. I mean, I think I think what defines our communities is ultimately like the agendas that we're pursuing. You understand what I'm saying? Because it's like once you establish like, what your goal is, then you can also identify what the barriers are that prevent you from getting to that goal. And those are the things that you essentially have to overcome, you have to deal with, right? So for somebody like me who I want true I want black people or African people to really be able to practice or embody true sovereignty or true self-determination. That's a tall order in a world where you've been subjugated and in a world where a system of racial dominance or racial hierarchy has been established and has been refined to the level that it's currently been refined to. It's a very tall order, but I don't think that it is impossible because ultimately the way that these systems are maintained through false choices. It's like people get to dictate, what your binary is, what your A and your B is. When you realize that there's also, and I'm sorry for I don't mean to get like philosophical in some of these like responses, but it's just the way that I think. So like this is the way that
Go ahead, brother.
yeah, it's the way that my wheels spin. But ultimately, what I'm saying, to come back to your primary question, is I think our agendas and our definitions is what gives definition to the communities that we are a part of, right? So for me, I would say I'm a part of a community of Pan African nationalists, but within that community, you have folks who, there's this debate where people ask the question, can you be African without practicing African culture? And can you practice African culture without practicing African spirituality? Now, for me, I would answer the answers to that is no. So what does that mean for like my nation building efforts, right? So there's so much nuance and what I refer to as political ingenuity that goes into building our goal. But if we're not building in the same direction, and I think that that's the philosophical difference that I started with at the beginning. In the manosphere, you have certain brothers who, on one side, say that racism, white supremacy doesn't exist. And then you have others who say it does, but it's nothing that we can do about it. For me, I can never be a part of a community where the men in that group believes or accepts that their manhood is defeated and conquered and there's nothing they can do but start from where they are. Like I can't accept that. You know what I mean? So that's why I would say that, my politics, my aspirations and my agenda is what shapes the community that I'm a part of, not necessarily because we draw from the same sources or we have the same reference materials.
I appreciate the agenda point. I really do. It is a good point, but I will say this: nuances in everything, including the manosphere and its
Mhm.
practices. So, for example, you talked about Pan Africanism. Well, there are brothers in the Manosphere who go to Africa and build families and try to build communities and businesses there. I mean, that's kind of the same structure we're looking for within the American landscape. But as I was telling Courtney Michelle yesterday, shout out to her, she's a great content creator. Uh, is it possible to grow that community in the States? And this is half rhetorical. I mean, the States are known for being, how can I put it? The soil has too much white supremacy in it. So can a community grow? I mean, we've shown throughout history that they've actually been quite effective at eliminating our communities. We've seen it with Seneca Village, Oscarville, Bronzeville, East St. Louis, Tulsa, Rosewood. I mean, it happens too often to not ignore. So,
The
I mean,
the
is that
difference,
YSBM like
yeah, no,
a
I
solution or a Pan-Africanist structure that can be used?
yeah, no, I do think that, and this I actually argue, I debate with a lot of brothers, who are Pan-Africanists on this topic, because there are a lot of brothers who think that no level of self-determination can be established for Black people in the Western world, and I don't I don't believe that. I do believe in a multipolar reality, but I think that no multipolar reality can be sustained without a Pan-African superpower established on the continent. Like, that's critical, right? That's critical. Now, that doesn't mean that we cannot work on building other, satellites of power before that Pan-African superpower
Yeah,
exists. But this is a
yeah.
deep political conversation. Now, the other point that you raise, and I want to tease out a couple of things here, because
Okay.
I did a lecture a few years ago. It was called "The Pan-African Costume Ball and the Climate of Confusion." And the reason why I did that lecture is because when people talk about Pan-Africanism, Kwame Ture tells us Pan-Africanism isn't an ideology, it's an objective. So in that regard, it really is an umbrella project. And under that umbrella, there's various different frameworks, right? So I'll give you a great example of Pan-Africanism, but it's a form that I don't agree with. The United States government has a project called YALI, Young African Leadership Initiative. It is indeed a Pan-African project in form, right? Everything about it is a Pan-African objective. And they even say it, if you go to the website, they actually call it Pan-African and Afrocentric. But politically, what is it meant to do? It is meant to further the interests of the United States empire on the African continent, same like AFRICOM, African Command, right? So it's
Yep.
meant to secure for the United States resources for US capital and US commerce, US companies. That is not something that points to liberation for me, although it's Pan African, right? So I think that that's what we tease out. So, yeah, you can move to Africa, you can marry a woman on the African continent, but does that action actually liberate or allow for Black people to live sovereign and self-determining? And my answer would be no. I
Mm,
think that you need a much sharper sword in order to get there. And like that's, some of the people that I engage in battle with, like we've sharpened those swords, but it's like that sword is so sharp and we've become such a vanguard. A vanguard is detached from the mass, it's detached from the larger military, it goes out front. So
yeah.
now it's like, okay, we're too far away from the mass and they're going in a different direction. We're like the scouts that went ahead. So how do I go back and infuse some of this energy, some of these ideas into the mass and let them, like, almost help them to have a compass that gives them a better true north than what they currently have.
Mm,
That's the first part. But the part about us, the soil that we have to be most concerned with, the soil that has to be most fertile is that which exists here. The seeds that get planted here are what determine the intangibles for the community. This is why the Jewish community can flourish wherever they are. If it's a ghetto or if it's New York City high rises, the intangibles that they have built in here that culture has given them. And oh, by the way, if you study their texts, they go through the process of how they built and established their culture because they were fragmented, right? And their texts, right? And their Torah, it tells you that they were split and they were spread about everywhere. So they talk about the process by which they come back and culminate and create group identity. This isn't rocket science, but it is hard work. And I think a lot of us eschew the hard work necessary for liberation. And that's been a very big problem. I think that we would much rather some type of short term comfort and convenience that allows us a measure of safety or pleasure in our life, but that comes at the expense of our future generations and our future liberation. And that's not a deal that I'm willing to take.
No, I can understand that definitely. We do have to think for the future. Reminded of the old proverb: the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next
Yeah,
best
yeah.
time is now.
Yes, yes, yes.
So I definitely understand that portion, but we want our works to be effective as well.
Hmm.
So that's the only part I was mentioning. It looks like it could be a decent conversation. Hopefully, it's fruitful as you go forward. Appreciate this conversation, but I'm gonna let you get your tea. I'm gonna let you get your,
I,
your orange juice, whatever you got to get, brother, because
appreciate you.
you really up here streaming through it all. So but
All
look
right.
forward to any future conversations. Just try not to bash us too much on the Manosphere side, please.
I'm trying to be nuanced. You know, what happens is I like I don't even want to call them attacks. I did a stream a couple of weeks ago about this Pearly situation, and I asked a question. And me
Yeah, I
asking
saw it.
that
It was a good
question,
stream.
I started getting a lot of folks attacking me. So it's like and it's like when I'm listening to people, it's hard for me not to point out like the coon kind of like philosophies that I'm hearing. But I'm trying to get better because I don't want to. My goal is always to kill the cancer, but not the body. So I don't want to dismiss the full manosphere. I actually try to leave space for diversity of thought and contours. Or I really try to leave that. But like folks are going to think what they want to think because anybody who doesn't agree with them is their enemy. So
All right, well, good. Well, hope it's a good conversation. Again, appreciate the stream. I'm gonna fall back and let you get some rest, brother. You
all right, bro.
deserve it. You deserve.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you. All right, Mr. A. Appreciate the $5 super chat. It says drop it in the show support. Take it easy on Mawale. Get ready for that Nas album to drop. Absolutely. I'm ready for that. I'm going to hit the track tomorrow and be running to that one. So I'm looking forward to it.